Hi, Alex.
Hi.
Welcome to Dance Macabre.
Yes,
I'm Meaghan.
yes, I'm Alex. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast on the
Yes.
medieval in Buffy.
Yes, thank you so much. And so this week we are talking about the two Buffy episodes, Witch and Teacher's Pet. And just to kind of get logistics out of the way briefly, Witch was written by Dana Reston and directed by Stephen Cragg. It actually aired on my birthday, March 17th in
Really?
1997. I wasn't born in 97, but my birthday is March.
That's cute, though.
And then Teacher's Pet, written by David Greenwalt. That's a name that we will encounter quite a bit in these
Yes.
first few seasons. And then it was directed by Bruce Seth Green, another name that we're going to get. And not to confuse Seth Green with Bruce Seth Green. That'll
Yeah.
make sense in a season or so.
Yeah.
But
I remember being really confused by that when I was a kid because I really enjoyed Seth Green. And so
yeah,
I knew his name. I didn't know all their names, but I knew his. And so when Bruce Seth Green started popping up on the screen, I was like, wait, is that like his director name? Like, is he doing two things? How is this possible?
yeah, exactly. And it aired, Teacher's Pet aired on the 24th of March, 1997. So, 7 days later. So just to kind of give us a time warp, right? So we're in early 1997, which is very prevalent in these episodes in regards to outfits, genre, and
Yeah.
everything. So that's why I mention it. But before we get into our episodes, it is time for our mug discussion. Magical mugs. We
Yes.
haven't come up with a name for it. I'm, my usual.
Are you on New Orleans?
Underground.
I do love that mug so much. And I have my Halloween cats. There you are. For the listeners at home, I'm showing a mug of black cats in orange hats, which sounds like a kid's book. And it's already covered in lipstick stains. So that's me.
I know. That's mine is too. No, it's very cute. It says like boo and has like little jack-o'-lanterns and it's very,
Yeah.
very cute.
Little orange bats and stars. It's huge as well. It is about the size of my head. I bought it on eBay when it didn't have like measurements next to it. And I thought, that's just going to be a cute little mug. Perfect. And then it is too
Huge.
big. It's like
I had a mug like that in high school that I called my bowl-lug, like a bowl mug.
That's it.
So yeah, that it's your Halloween cat bowl-ug.
Yes. I love it.
Term.
And I also wanted to point out as well that completely independently, Meaghan and I have accessorized in honor of the episodes that we're discussing today.
Yes.
Like we did not plan this, but I have arrived wearing my Art Nouveau amber ring because I noticed Joyce, especially in Witch, is just covered in amber jewelry, rings, earrings, all that. She looks fantastic with it. So I just thought I'd do a little Joyce tribute with my amber ring.
Yeah,
and Meaghan,
Joyce,
what are you wearing?
So, dear listeners, I am wearing my cockroach earrings. They're glittery cockroaches. I actually got them in New Orleans at the same place that I got my mug.
Fantastic.
St. Louis Cemetery #1. I actually wore these on our very first episode that we recorded.
I remember.
Pilot intro, but my hair was down and you couldn't really tell. And I'm wearing these in honors of Teacher's Pet. But then I also have my hair in bun pigtails, so pom-poms, in honor of Witch.
Cute. Very cute.
Also, wait, dear listeners, I have very, very curly hair that is unruly, and this morning it did not want to cooperate with life. So this was a good cheat to get away with it. So, yeah, that intro and descriptions aside, let's just dive right in. We're going to do our best to go in order, but there might be some jumbling about because we do have a theme for this week. Alex, what is our kind of unifying theme for these two episodes?
Femme Fatale. We're going to be following the malevolent and maleficent woman in these episodes, and we're going to be following how that kind of trope develops across the two. Because we also think it's quite interesting that we enter monster of the week territory with these two episodes. Like, the first ones have a distinct thesis. This is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Here are the vampires. Here are the stakes. Haha. And so it goes, it sets everything up. And then these two episodes are like, but we're not just vampires. We are also witches, which you might expect, and bug people. So it kind of pulls the rug out from underneath you pretty quickly so that you are destabilized with your expectations.
Yes, it does. And quickly, before we dive in, Alex, can you describe the femme fatale trope just a little bit more for our listeners who maybe have heard it but don't know exactly what it means, because it does shift over time and according to genre, I feel.
Yes, of course. And of course, it's worth noting that the term femme fatale has a very distinct origin in film noir. That's kind of where it begins in film studies terminology. And it
Yes.
describes the woman. So in film noir, what usually happens is you have the dumb lug character who's just kind of bumbling about making trouble. You also have the jaded, cynical investigator type. He doesn't necessarily have to be a private eye or a police officer. He just has to be searching for the truth. And during his search for the truth, he comes across the femme fatale. So this is usually a very beautiful, seductive woman who is a bit ambiguous as to her motivations. She's a bit dangerous. She's usually involved in some way in the crime, and he gets romantically involved with her. Sometimes it works out. She turns out to have a heart of gold. Sometimes she is the villain of the piece and she ruins his life for a little bit until everything comes good in the end. So nowadays we just kind of apply femme fatale to any sexy, dangerous woman. But she definitely has her roots in literature and art history as well. Any woman who is in some way dangerous to, let's say, masculine ideologies can kind of be cast as a femme fatale. What do you think? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. And again, film noir is from the 40s and 50s, specifically American film. Or at least that was how I was kind of taught, because that genre then kind of comes to Europe, but we rapidly get into New Wave in Europe. But examples of the femme fatale, are going to be, or examples of films with femme fatales that are also noirs are Sunset Boulevard, Double Indemnity, or even a bit later, it's a neo-noir in a sense, Chinatown.
Yes.
And the name is quite explanatory. I mean, femme, female, and then fatale, fatal.
Yes.
And as Alex said, more often than not, she's going to be duplicitous. She's going to have ulterior motives and kind of turn out to be some sort of kind of trickster woman. But there are occasions, again, I would say Chinatown, without giving it away, is a good one, where the woman is kind of stuck in the middle. And she's a femme fatale because she's gorgeous and because she has a lot of emotional baggage. But then there's a tragic association with her, and death always hovers around the femme fatale in some capacity. But other than that, Alex, I think, right, I just wanted to make sure that people were thinking of the timeline properly.
Yes. And it is also worth noting that, like you mentioned with Chinatown, film noir and that sort of genre did have a bit of a resurgence in the 90s. Like LA Confidential, wasn't that the 90s as well?
Yeah, and like the film Black Dahlia, which was, I think, 2005. There is, the femme fatale is also kind of like the lady in red, right?
Yeah.
Lady in red walks in, slinks, is very seductive, red lipstick, just like us. Very Jessica Rabbit-y, but then they have, the gun up holster on their hip or something. So that's a lot on the femme fatale, but just to let you know, we will be discussing, as Alex said, that kind of trope, that concept originates. It's been around for a long time. We'll discuss in Teacher's Pet, especially, it's connected to Greek mythology and even earlier mythology. So that's our thread for this week, or our theme, overarching.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to be the bridge between the two episodes, because the two episodes are quite distinct. We have one on witchcraft, we have one on insects. And so we like to make sure there's narrative flow to these episodes, and we realized that what they had in common were women doing wrong.
Which is really interesting, just kind of looking on the outside of season 1 Buffy, and just the way that the first 2 episodes are set, where we have a young chosen one that's, a high school girl trying to fit in, that is the kind of antithesis to the femme fatale, but simultaneously a femme fatale herself.
Yeah.
An intentional one, but the first few episodes are female empowerment, right? And Buffy kicks ass, and she's petite and sprightly and everything. And then we kind of have this quick pivot that is then about dangerous women and how we're gone awry, I guess you could say. And again, it's not like incredibly overt, but it was interesting to really pick up on that on this rewatch.
Yeah. And again, I wonder if that's not deliberate in the same way that shifting the monsters may have been deliberate, in that maybe that was a signal where it's not just going to be a one-note show that's all girl power and the girls can do no wrong. If they were kind of signaling, no, we're not going to be focusing on the age-old narratives of the women are the evil ones and we must fight against them, but nor are we going to be flipping that script so that, the women become two-dimensional, virtuous characters. So I like that they kind of introduced that kind of like humanity, like a cultural humanity to female characters, that we don't always have to be evil, we don't always have to be good, we don't always have to be, this dichotomy. We can be something in the middle.
Exactly, and the kind of extremes of it too. But getting to the episodes now, because I think we could talk about this forever. female power in which? What kinds of female power or self-expression do we have? Let's dive in, Alex, because this is more your episode. It's kind of funny. And then teacher's pet is a bit more mine in regards to our research and interest, which I found funny.
So this is going to be a lot of fun for us to cover. Okay, so briefly, the plot of which is Buffy is auditioning the correct term in cheerleading? I'm so sorry, this is my British showing.
You'd probably say trying out, but
okay.
Audition, it does make sense. It's just showing that you're a theater child, though.
Cheerleading didn't exist in my world growing up, so it's really like I feel very sometimes a deep kinship with Giles.
Whose quote I will share because I assign us, or not assign, but I give us prompts to do and think about, and then I'm the worst at following my own advice. So Giles has got quite a few lines that are my lines of the week throughout both episodes. So just letting you know.
I look forward to it. I think he's one of mine as well, actually. So yes, Buffy is trying out to be a cheerleader. And we find out that she was a cheerleader in her previous school. She really enjoyed it. Joyce at one moment acknowledges that everything went wrong for Buffy when she stopped cheerleading. And Joyce associates Buffy's perceived delinquency as like a result of that disconnection from her cheerleading. So she went from being wholesome girl, all-American cheerleader type to burning down a school building for no good reason, probably from Joyce's perspective. Yeah. So you kind of get that insight into Buffy's past and why cheering might be important to Buffy. But terrible things start happening to the other cheerleaders, terrible supernatural things. One of them, her mouth seals shut and she just screams behind this wall of flesh, which really freaked me out as a kid.
Very disturbing. We also have someone whose hands spontaneously catch on. Oh man, I need to look up spontaneous combustion. That's okay. That can be a bite size or something on the...
It's fine.
Girl's hands move fast. Catch on fire, and Cordelia goes blind in a really spooky way.
Yeah, in a very slow decay of sight while she's in driver's ed. Another very alien thing to UK audiences is the fact that you got to learn how to drive in school.
We'll touch upon that a little bit, because also the boys watched the episodes with me and they had some funny commentary on that scene in particular. So when we get there, just a quick aside.
Okay, so it becomes apparent that some malevolent magic presence is cursing the young women who are trying out to be cheerleaders, and the assumption is it is because they too want to be a cheerleader, because cheerleading, very satisfyingly in this episode, is presented not as like this frivolous nonsense thing that happens at the side of games, but as an incredibly competitive sport. Some of these cheerleaders train with professional cheerleader like athletic trainers to be the best that they can be. So there's real ambition around this, which I appreciate. And then we discover Amy. Amy is also trying out to be a cheerleader, and we find out she doesn't really want to be a cheerleader, but her mum was cheer queen back when, is how she's described. Catherine the Great. Yeah. So she is trying to relive her mother's glory days against her will. She's undergoing that by maternal pressure. And then as the episode goes on, we find out that Catherine, Amy's mother, body swaps with her daughter against her daughter's will. So Amy ends up living in her mother's body. Her mother lives in Amy's body. And mother, as Amy, tries to be a good cheerleader, but can't get Amy's body to move the way she wants it to, so she's appalled. And it becomes clear that Amy's mother is the witch who's been causing all this harm. Hijinks. Eventually, Giles and Buffy defeat the witch and put the bodies back in their correct places.
Yeah, unswap them.
They unswap them. So Amy ends up being herself, and suddenly she starts wearing baggy clothes and she's eating food because her mum goes on broth kicks and starves them both. And she reveals that she hates cheerleading because at one point she says to Cordelia, I know I, for one, will miss the academic thrill of spelling out words on my arms, or something like that. And so you start to get a real sense of who Amy is as a person by the end.
Yeah, a great summary. So a quick few things aside, because being the American here and cheerleading kind of being a bit more of our culture. So there was cheerleading in high school. I did not try out for it. Our cheer team at the time was not the biggest nor the best, but they got better throughout the years. And I think now they're actually quite competitive and good. But cheering in America, especially in the South, in the Midwest, is a huge sport and still is. And if you haven't seen the series, I recommend it because I think it's this really interesting thought project. But Dallas Cowboy cheerleader show on Netflix shows the athleticism, the dance skill, the rigor, and then also the problematic male gaziness of female cheering. Of course, there are male cheerleaders, let's not forget that. And I did a little bit of homework because there was a cheer genre in America, especially, and I thought that it was a bit around the Buffy time. It comes just a tiny bit after, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't in television and like the zeitgeist. So this was 97. 92, the Buffy film came out, where Buffy was a cheerleader. That's not necessarily canon, despite the end where the gymnasium is set on fire. That's the only thing that kind of crosses over. But I just love the cheer genre, so Bring It On. Grew up watching that on VHS nonstop. That was 2000. We have the Step Up genre, 2006, and then every 2 years after that. We have But I'm a Cheerleader, which we'll probably mention later on in this season because an actress from that is in that film, or a Buffy episode in that film. That was 99, but that expectation of the cheerleader is very prevalent in that film. That's why I mention it. So, yeah, cheering, big, big deal. So much so that there's actually an infamous case in America that is the cheerleading murder attempt, the cheerleader mom murders. There's lots of different names. And this is the case of Wanda Holloway. So just very, very quickly, because it's absurd. So Wanda Webb Holloway is an American woman from Channelview, Texas. So again, South Texas, it's a big deal, was convicted of attempting to hire a hitman to kill the mother of her daughter's junior high school cheerleading rival. This is in 1991.
For the British folk in the audience, could you define what age range junior is? Because we're not always quite sure.
Junior high school will be years between 6 and 8, maybe 9. So preteen, tweenie, teen, early teen.
So we're looking at about like age 10 to maybe age 13, 14?
I would say maybe like 12 to 14, 15.
Okay.
So just quickly, this is going off Wikipedia, but I just think it's bonkers and it ties in so well to Witch. I wonder if they followed the story. They must have.
They must have.
So in 91, Holloway's daughter, Shanna, Shanna, narrowly missed out on a spot on her junior high school squad for 2 consecutive years. Oh, not just once, but twice. And so Holloway's ex-brother-in-law, Terry Harper, reports to police that Holloway, so Shanna's mother, the antagonist center of this story, asked him to hire a hitman to kill Verna Heath, the mother of the 14-year-old girl who had beaten Shanna onto the squad. Holloway allegedly believed that Heath's daughter would be so devastated by her mother's death that she would drop out of the cheerleading team, thereby giving the spot to Shanna. And then Holloway was arrested the next day. Because if I recall correctly, Wanda Holloway, right, one that wants the murder, she was really into cheer when she was growing up, very much like Amy's mom. And just this not being able to let go and the extent and the pressure, because Shanna, like, enjoyed cheer, but it, like Amy, it wasn't her end-all be-all. So just showing 14-year-olds, and one mother's trying to poison to death the other mother, so that the hopefully deceased mother's daughter will drop off the team because her mom died. This is 14-year-olds. This isn't club cheer, you know, like how you have club sports. This is just school, just
school. And the thing is, it's not even that it's 14-year-olds, because it clearly has absolutely nothing to do with her daughter as a person or age group. That is all the mum just pouring all that pressure and thwarted life hopes into that situation. Horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. And definitely, I do definitely think that must have influenced this episode.
I'll try to do some backtracking homework and see if that comes up anywhere. But I just wanted to, I love true crime. History of crime is one of my genres. And I also just wanted to be like, Buffy, it's a fiction show, right? But also there are real things that are just batshit crazy that happen that can be stranger than fiction. And that's kind of one of them. So, Witch, Femme Fatale.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start? Where do you want to go?
Well, I'm going to refocus us because I love the true crime. I love finding out about the things in the background that influence Buffy. But I am also aware that we are medievalists. And so we want to talk a little bit about how the medieval influences Buffy. And you can see that really strongly in the figure of the witch herself. So this is where I'm probably going to rabbit a little bit overexcitedly because I did one of my thesis chapters on medieval witches. So some quick housekeeping on witches. Medieval era did not burn witches. No, that was the Renaissance. the Enlightenment. Anytime someone talks about the Dark Ages and how they're going to be doing witch burnings like it's the Middle Ages, I get very cross because that was not the case. That was the Renaissance. That's my footnote.
Also, just kind of really any sort of extreme barbaric, get medieval on your ass, a la Pulp Fiction violence. A lot of that is actually Victorian conceptions of the medieval that are actually early modern. So we're talking about 1580 onwards.
Yes, because of course, I don't think we've actually, maybe we did in our intro, but I don't know if we've ever explained that the Middle Ages go from about 500 BC to the late 1400s. And that's pushing it at the end of the late 1400s.
Yeah, we touched upon it a little bit, at least on the propaganda campaign of the Victorians and conceptualizing the Middle Ages. I don't know if we said the years. I would personally extend the Middle Ages to 1550, just because of people born at the end of the Middle Ages that are very much a medieval person. But as you can tell from us just giving two different dates, that end time is a bit flexible, but anything after 1550 is arguably not medieval. It's early modern, Renaissance.
Precisely. For the Brits in the audience who might be interested, we tend to end our Middle Ages with Henry VIII and the Reformation and that kind of fracture between Catholic and Church of England Protestant. That tends to be our moment. But of course, no one just woke up in the Renaissance cured of all their medieval thinking. People pass things on to their children and so on and so forth. So it's a dilution rather than an ending. But witch burnings very, very certainly happened in the Renaissance in like the 1600s more than any other medieval era. But that isn't to say that witches and witchcraft didn't exist in the medieval era. They did. And something interesting happens, and this is something that the episode picks up on a little bit, which I want to talk about. So, the medieval witch and earlier is largely a folkloric figure. Tends to be messy, tends to be very natural, tends to work with plants, herbs, bones, blood, spit, all that good stuff. Anyone who has ever watched Supernatural will know that Dean Winchester hates witches because they're unhygienic, unsanitary, that's what he says. And that's kind of the vibe of the medieval witch. It's a very sticky, icky thing. And you can see that in the episode where you have the cauldron with that bubbling green goo in it, the fact that they use hair to create spells, and Cordelia's hairband gets wrapped around a doll, and Buffy's bracelet gets used on a doll. Also worth noting, voodoo dolls have their origins in European folk traditions of the puppets.
Yes.
So what's being used in this episode isn't a voodoo doll, it is a puppet, which does the same action, but it has European roots. And it's important just to keep voodoo, to respect it and keep it self-contained and acknowledge that its practices are its own practices. And there are layers of influence and interaction. But I just wanted to make that clear. If I talk about a puppet, I'm talking about the dolls.
But puppets were also really popular, for those of you in America that might think, other than voodoo dolls, there were lots of puppets in Puritan England and part of those Salem witch trials and those trials. So a puppet is a doll that represents the likeness of the person that you want the spell, the curse to affect. So we see in Buffy the Barbie puppets.
I love that they use Barbie dolls for cheerleaders.
And Teacher's Pet definitely show the horror influence of Buffy. Like season 1 has lots of very dark shades that kind of slowly get filtered out. But I mean, these puppets, the one where the girl whose mouth, I don't know her name, gets, cast
Sealed.
over, her puppet, Barbie's face, is melted. So if you're wondering what puppets are and how they connect to the episode, that's what the figures are and what a puppet's purpose is.
How it's being used within that episode and how even that has roots in much older forms of witchcraft. It used to be puppets, you could make them out of wax and things like that. So this is a really 90s upgrade on the wax figure you carve and mush together yourself with someone's DNA. We'd call it DNA now. They'd just know it as a body part for sympathetic magic, like toenails, fingernails, spit, hair, blood, other fluids.
Yeah.
Whereas
to do a sympathetic magic, it's bite size, I think, because there's also in the Hebrew tradition the golem, right?
Yeah.
Similar, but not, and just kind of what sympathetic magic is, a la Frasier and everything. I cut you off, sorry.
That's okay. So so we have this kind of 90s upgrade on the puppet. It goes from being this icky folk horror item to a plastic Barbie doll, which I feel is kind of like it's Buffy in a microcosm. So you have all this icky witchcraft, which is definitely in alignment with the medieval understanding of witchcraft, but it is also gendered. So in the medieval era in particular, women were witches, men were magicians, sorcerers, necromancers. They got these lofty things. And the reason for that is women didn't have access to education, obviously, until very late in Western civilization. And so in the medieval era, there's this momentary shift where they go from being these folkloric figures that use what's around them, and then Catholicism gets involved really heavily. And suddenly, women can make pacts with the devil. And without needing education, their powers skyrocket and they suddenly become incredibly threatening because unfortunately it means that they do just reinvest in another branch of patriarchy. Instead of it being God and saints, it's Satan and demons. So it's an inverted form of Christianity that they get involved in, but they do get more power.
Yeah, it's just like The Witch, the Robert Eggers film, is
Exactly.
a testament to kind of that patriarchy exchanging one form for another.
Exactly. It's such a good film. If you haven't seen it, do see it. So, yes, suddenly women could be empowered without needing education, without needing human male intervention. They could just go over their heads or under their feet, depending, I suppose, and go straight to the devil and get power from him. And again, you can see this in the episode because Catherine calls on Seth. Yeah, so you're having kind of sound effects of demons there. They're not like actual biblical devils or mythological demons. They've just mushed sounds together, I suspect, to
But they
make.
sound very Gaelic in my sense, or like
Yeah.
Anglo-Norman. They don't sound as so we have Korsheth, which could be, I guess, a bit more universal, and then we have Kiliol.
Well, the eel at the end, that tends to mean something along the lines of light. So a lot of angel names have eel at the end or ale, like Michael, Michael. So it's just a mushy, let's just glue a whole bunch of sound effects together and make some demons, I
That's
feel.
also just demons throughout Buffy. We'll find, I
Oh,
mean, in season 6, there's a demon called the Glargul Kashmaznik, like, and the way it's spelled is absurd. Get ready, everybody, dear listeners.
it's gonna be fun.
Or there will be some fun names coming.
Yeah. So, yes, so you have Catherine, who is using the icky sticky witchcraft of blood and bodily parts and goo, but also calling on demons. So you have that medieval understanding of witchcraft there. But then you also have Giles in this episode.
Yes.
Now, Richard Kirchheifer, I apologize for that pronunciation if it's terrible, wrote the book Magic in the Middle Ages. And he wrote that men accessed magic through education. They knew Latin, they had access to libraries, they were usually part of a university. And he has this fantastic phrase for these men, and it is the clerical underworld of necromancers.
Ooh, we'll have to hold on to that for a Giles episode in the future.
Yes. So I wanted to point out that you have Catherine calling upon random demons, messy witchcraft, and then you have Giles, the most highly educated character of the show, really, especially in this area. He's peak dark academia in all his tweed and glasses and his stuffy British accent, which, is very plum in the mouth. And he speaks Latin to cast out this demon.
Yeah.
He's got this beaker in front of him in the science wing. No blackened cauldron and flames and cats and bones for Giles. He has alchemical apparatus, essentially. And he speaks Latin, and then he translates the Latin for the rest of us schmucks who don't speak Latin. And it's all, breath and cast out and darkness. And then he screams, "Release!" a lot.
And then
And release! Which is actually one of my quotes of the episode, because whenever my cat's claw gets caught in my clothes, you will hear me shout from across the house, "Really?" So you have Giles being part of the clerical underworld of necromancers, which could be plucked straight out of a medieval playbook. It's
Oh,
fantastic.
absolutely. I mean, that's all great. No comment. 10 out of 10. Because I'm looking at my notes to see how I can contribute. Literally, my first note following that, Alex, is not medieval. It's Buffy cannot dance.
No.
The cartwheel in the second tryout scene after the girl's hand set on fire. So Buffy's in the back right of like the square and Amy's on the back left. And this is like, I don't know, 10 minutes into the episode or so. Buffy's in a white tank top and like an orangish red skirt. Watch it because Amy's cartwheel's intentionally bad, right? So that she crashes in. Buffy, who is the Slayer, bless Sarah Michelle Gellar, because she just can't cartwheel.
So
and
awkward.
That's why they put her in the back, I'm assuming. And it just cracks me up every time because it's not necessarily a blooper, but it's kind of this goof that
she can't get her legs straight properly and her caw's kind of curved up. It's like she's never cartwheeled before.
Which, is I just find very funny. And just quick aside, I'm the aside girl today, but the actress who plays Amy, Elizabeth Ann Allen, which is actually quite close to my name because my middle name's Elizabeth and my last name's Allen.
Cute.
But she was actually the runner-up, if you will, first alternate for being Buffy.
Really?
Yeah, so they wrote this character specifically to kind of give her some time in the series and the show because she didn't end up getting the part of Buffy Summers because it went to Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Because didn't Sarah Michelle Gellar go for being Cordelia anyway?
Yeah, she did. And so like the podcast Buffy and the Vampire Slayer, they interview her, Elizabeth Ann Allen and stuff, and talk to her. And it's really interesting. So whenever I watch it now, knowing that, it's kind of fun to see what their dynamic is and how they are as actresses and to try to picture
how different Buffy would have been.
Yeah.
And also, I want to shout out for Elizabeth Ann Allen that she plays Misty Day in American Horror Story Coven. So she gets to revisit her witch role as like a Rhiannon-loving Stevie Nicks wannabe swamp witch who can bring dead things back to life. And she is immaculate in that show. The show is not without its issues, especially towards voodoo, but it's a great season. It's a great series, and she is phenomenal in it.
I only saw the first episode of that season, so I need to go back. And I haven't even finished season 1 American Horror Story. That didn't catch me initially. It's quite slow. But one other, I don't know if you noticed this, Alex. The girl whose hands catch on fire, when she's being extinguished, I think the stunt person is just a man not in a wig. So I meant to relook at that this morning and didn't, but
it does look odd. Something odd is happening there.
So yeah, I just like to kind of call those things out because Buffy, in regards to choreography with her stunt doubles in the fight scenes, it was actually pretty good most of the times. But stunt doubles for other characters is often comedic and lacking, and they're using what they have. So I like to point it out.
Did you see the stunt double at the top of the pyramid playing Amy/Catherine?
Yeah.
Look nothing like her. Nothing. Vaguely blonde and female. That's where it ended.
So actually, then my comment after that, so those are my kind of goofy asides though, is so returning to Joyce, her exhibition, her first exhibition at the art gallery. So we kind of learn more that Joyce is involved in the art world. And it's always kind of unclear if she's the owner and curator or if she's just the curator or what she is. It kind of morphs throughout.
Yeah, the fact that she's opening boxes in her own kitchen makes me think owner.
Yeah, and these boxes are for, again, her first exhibition that is an African art exhibition. But the African art that we see is just the top half of a fertility statue. I think we've all probably seen those at some point. They're the ones that have very, very large, exaggerated, usually phallic appendices, apparati, whatever, big penises.
Yeah, big penises. Let's just call a penis penis. They have very big penises. And disproportionately so.
Yeah, and Buffy's like looking at it and Joyce goes, oh, you don't need to see that. But this was kind of one of the first times that so we know that in the episode when it's opening that there's like a witch about, right? Because the cauldron is like the first scene and the very dramatic, spooky puppets hanging and everything. But the way that Joyce's exhibition is introduced, there is a little bit, is there some kind of voodoo, for lack of a better term, right now going on?
That's a good point.
Could that be connected? And that was the first time that kind of sinister connection to that particular scene caught me or like kind of stood out, where it's like a bit of a red herring. It's not because we know that there's a witch, but also could this be involved with that in some capacity?
It's certainly setting it up that could be something.
And I'll have a little bit more to say on that use of African culture as exotic and othering in Teacher's Pet. And then we will also have the pack on our next episode. And then there's also another episode at the beginning of season 3 that is one of my least favorite episodes that's very about that and kind of problematic. And then later seasons. So I just kind of want to flag that now, that every time there's something to do with like African art, African culture, it is usually with some kind of negative or dark magic, you know, it's primal kind of atmosphere. So, but I just, also, like, as you said, Alex, Joyce is just unpacking this in the kitchen. They have a dining room. Like, I don't.
Why, yeah, I have
so many questions.
So many questions.
Yeah. And then Joyce also has, you know, a bad moment. She's like, I'm sorry, I can't listen to you, Buffy. I'm just so busy. And I'm just like, Joyce. Again, I like Joyce holistically, but she's really dropping the ball right now.
I hate Joyce.
We'll touch on that as we go.
I think, right, this might be a nice segue into talking about Teacher's Pet, actually. But I find it remarkable that Joyce, okay, from her perspective, Buffy set fire to a school. That's a problem. I will give her that. But other than that, we haven't really seen Joyce see Buffy do anything bad. She doesn't know Buffy sneaks out to fight vampires. She doesn't know, so we can't add that to the list. She gives Buffy absolutely no grace. She says these passive-aggressive asides like, you're not in trouble. Oh, no, not yet. So she totally expects Buffy to fail and flunk and F up across the board. And then you have Dr. Gregory in Teacher's Pet, who says he doesn't give a damn about Buffy's excuses. He doesn't care about what she's done before. She has a fine mind, and if she can apply herself, she'll be amazing. And then he says to her, let's make them eat that permanent record. That was my quote of Teacher's Pet. Because he, a complete stranger to Buffy, is willing to give her more grace than her own mother. Yeah. I hate Joyce. I hate Joyce.
R.I.P. So, yeah, I guess we can quickly, or like, you know, pivot to Teacher's Pet. One final thing. Do you have a scene stealer for Witch?
For Witch? It's gotta be... Yeah. It's gotta be Buffy's hideous orange eyeshadow. Okay. Hideous. It's the worst thing. I couldn't stop staring at it the entire time. So it stole the scene, but not in a way I liked. Like...
So mine was Buffy's cupcake image t-shirt. I think she's wearing it in the scene with Joyce and the...
Macho man.
Yeah, and it's a t-shirt that has a picture of a cupcake on it. Why? It's just part of that weird, these early 2000s, they could, they did.
Yeah. And also it's the fact that it's clearly just an iron-on transfer. It's not even a professional t-shirt because you can see the plastic pulling apart over her chest.
And then my second scene stealer for the honorary one for Witch is we get our first appearance of witchcraft.
Yeah.
Look like vampire that we will see many a time throughout the series.
Yeah, I saw that too. Giles is consulting it when the teenagers are at the computer discovering that Xander, and this might be like worth unpacking in Teacher's Pet. Xander has been taking out books on witchcraft so he can look at the nudie engravings. Yes. And while the teenagers are discovering this, Giles is over at the table doing his dark academia stuff of actually, you know, researching witchcraft in the book, Witchcraft.
So, yeah, great. I already said that my quote for Witch was Giles. It's you have a sacred birthright, Buffy. You were chosen to destroy vampires, not to wave pom-poms at people. And he calls cheerleading a cult, which is also just very funny. But so Teacher's Pet will take that idea, right, of witchcraft, of Femme Fatale and everything, and pivot a bit to another monster of the week. So, Teacher's Pet. I think it's actually a very fun name for the episode itself. A bit more creative than Witch, I would say, which is one word.
It does what it says on the tin, doesn't it?
So in Teacher's Pet, we open up with the biology class, and Buffy is not doing her homework, and Dr. Gregory asks her a question about how ants communicate. And it's a funny scene because behind him, Willow is trying to mime touch and smell. And so she strokes Xander so Buffy gets touch. And then she's like trying to waft Xander, and Buffy goes, B.O., which isn't wrong because that's a smell.
Yeah.
What, you know, Dr. Gregory is like, do your homework, Buffy. Willow, is there anything else you want to help her with? And then he calls Buffy, because then class the bell rings, and we have the beautiful exchange where Dr. Gregory is like, I have faith in you. Let's make him eat that permanent record. And he's looking very old school. He's looking at a slide carousel, the images, so the little tiny Polaroids that go in, and something happens. Something comes out of a closet. And we get it's kind of my scene stealer every time you hear it, that like sound for the beastie, because it's just so dramatic. And so what ends up happening is that poor Dr. Gregory is decapitated and his body is found in the cafeteria refrigerator. Cordelia is the one that finds it. She's going for her prescribed lunch from her doctor, as if that's a thing that happens. It just feels very LA. And she opens the fridge freezer and Dr. Gregory's body's in there with no head. Like, just barely fits.
Can we just acknowledge the terrible prop usage of that, though? Because it is clearly either it is just a mannequin that they've scrushed in, or it is a person stood up inside the locker with their head, because the body's shoulders are against the top shelf of the locker, which isn't visible. So it's clearly just someone stood with their head in a hole.
It's great. It's very also, hearkening back to the body in the locker, in the girls' locker room.
Yes.
So creatures just shoving bodies on a high school campus in random spaces, because we're not really told why he's in a freezer.
No.
But that disposal, the vampires make a bit more sense, because as you said, Darla tries to kind of wreak chaos and it's funny and cheek, but with this, it's more just so that Cordelia finds it.
And even like by the end of the episode, where there's the reveal at the end of the episode with eggs, they're in the science lab. So that means that all the shenanigans that go on between a praying mantis, a lady praying mantis, and a boy praying mantis when they love each other very much, that means that all of that happened in the biology lab.
Yeah.
So
where's the body?
Yeah, why carry the body? Why drag it across however many corridors? Even if it's just one corridor, that's still a corridor. And then stuff it upright in a cupboard.
These are the logic questions that Buffy does not ask, and we just have to take it at face value.
Yeah.
Like, yep, that makes sense.
Sure, why not?
But so before they find the body, Dr. Gregory's just declared missing. And so my boyfriend and housemate were like, but where are the police? Why haven't they contacted the police? So this is another example of the Sunnydale police just aren't involved ever. And school continues despite a body being found in the cafeteria, which is a health code violation and also just a violation of a bunch of other things.
And also it occurs just like a couple of weeks after another body has been found on campus. Like, one body you can forgive and leave a school open. 2 bodies being murdered on a campus. An investigation ought to happen. No?
Yeah. But it doesn't. So Gregory's missing, and we have a scene in between that is just worth noting, because Buffy encounters Angel at the Bronze, and they're outside talking. He goes, "You're cold," and gives her his leather jacket, which becomes Buffy's leather jacket, and it becomes, just like the cross, a kind of motif, and more than a prop, it's kind of like a theme or something that signifies and speaks other subtext bits throughout at least season 1. So big, important. Also, Angel just reveals no other information about himself, and it's just the problematic age difference, brooding man, young.
Yeah. I mean, I found the jacket interesting because Buffy, out of nowhere, in the first 2 episodes that we see, she has this big leather jacket, like this big brown leather jacket, which makes no sense for her wardrobe.
Not at all.
One way or another. Like, it isn't even the kind of oversized leather jacket that you see in 90s, like, aesthetics. Like, you see in The Craft, Nave Campbell in The Craft wears this oversized leather jacket. But it fits. Does not fit anything Buffy wears. It again feels, I'm sorry, it does feel very Dean Winchester. He gets known by his big leather jacket, and I know he comes after, and they probably hate that I draw a connection to Buffy, but I do.
There are references, though.
Yeah. But then that big leather jacket of Buffy's disappears and gets replaced by this Angel jacket. And I wonder if it's not a visual hark back to the film, where in the film she wears her white prom dress and then a leather bike jacket. And I think they just liked that image.
Yeah.
And wanted to have it any way they could.
Yeah, probably. Apparently also the leather jacket of Angel's was like $1,500 or something back then. It was the most expensive prop that they got because they thought they just went, it has to be this.
It has to be. Do you know they did the same thing with Spike's jacket? That is like an Armani jacket or something like that when he comes around.
Yeah, but his is nicer. I like
his is beautiful. But they had to throw that under like a truck to try and beat the bejesus out of it. Yeah.
look.
To make it look like a punk's leather jacket instead of this stunning couture
Yeah.
leather coat.
But so yeah, Buffy now has Angel's jacket, and she later on in the episode wants to give it back, and he's like, "No, it looks better on you." And you're like, "Okay, gag me," but also teach.
Also, calm down, 27-year-old
Yeah.
hitting on a 16-year-old actor.
So, anyways, because Dr. Gregory is missing/deceased, they hire a substitute teacher, Miss Natalie French, who, when she first, it's before school starts, apparently, and they're sitting out in front of the Sunnydale High, little front quad. And Miss French walks up, and it's very dramatic, and it's very, oh, this beautiful woman is coming up. The actress who plays Natalie French is very distinct looking, and she's also South African, so Musetta Vander. So I think that's kind of an interesting choice. Just, I don't know if that was intentional to try to hire an international actress, but her accent, the way she speaks, is a bit off because that's like that English, it's got different inflections. Yeah. So it does kind of work with there's something different about Miss French. She just instantly starts preying on Xander, kind of like, oh, do you know where this room is? I need help. And instead, I cannot remember the guy's name. There's like the villain of the episode, the boy, Blaine.
Blaine.
Oh, I can show you where it is. And Blaine's very much, we get little scenes of him being like, oh yeah, no, I've hooked up with X amount of girls. So someone that's very much bragging about their count. And so that'll become important in just a moment. So in a biology lesson on insects with Miss French, so now we're back in the lab. They're talking about bugs. So that connects because we're talking about ants before. And they're talking about praying mantises and how insects are these great misunderstood creatures. And she goes, oh, it would, for the science fair, it would be fun if we made, praying mantis eggs. Who would want to help me? And all the boys raise their hand, every single one. And the girls don't understand what's happening. And so that becomes important because she gets the boys to volunteer after class and in spare time. And it kind of then cuts and pivots quickly from that part of the story to Buffy's out. We call it patrolling, but at this point in the series, it's still called hunting, which is interesting. I can't recall exactly when they make that transition, but those have two very different connotations. Hunting vampires and patrolling, which is about protecting and looking at the perimeter.
Yeah.
But she's in a park that we never go back to, Weatherly Park. It's mentioned, but I don't think we ever really return to that park in the series.
Is that the one with the children's playground, though?
It might be.
But that's more season 2.
When we get there. Yeah, Drusilla's playground. But Buffy's out hunting, and she's looking for a vampire with a giant fork claw hand, because that was why Angel had mysteriously appeared to her. He was like, beware. He's gonna get you. He's relentless. And so Buffy's like, okay, great. Thanks for the crypticism. And she finds the guy, but police were patrolling the park, and so Buffy and Clawman are on the run. And Miss French is walking past with her groceries, which is just so funny because they're paper bags, and you can just tell very much groceries.
I was gonna say, okay, so as a Brit speaking to an American, are those paper bags actually a thing in America? Is that how people shop, at all?
They used to be. Not
really.
Some places have brought back paper bags, but usually they have a handle now.
Okay.
But the giant square paper bag was definitely a thing. Yes.
I always just assumed it was an American myth.
But so Buffy sees Miss French, and she sees that this fork vamp is gonna stalk her, and then she turns and looks at him, and he runs away, and he goes into a manhole and escapes. And Buffy's like, that's weird. Why would Miss French frighten a terrifying vamp man? And so she goes to Giles and she's like, this happened, don't understand why. It then starts to transgress. Things start to get really messy really quick in regards to predatory stuff. Xander goes to help Miss French, and she says, oh, I've done a stupid thing. All the supplies are at home. Can you come to my house later tonight? Xander, who is pheromone soaked, we find out, he's just like, oh yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I can do that. Just go to a teacher's house that's been TAing for or substituting for
12 hours.
Yeah. And so we find out that Blaine had gone to Miss French's house the night before, and he wasn't at school that day. And his parents actually called to school saying, oh, he didn't come home last night. So red flags kind of start going up. And Giles and Buffy haven't found out that Xander is going to Miss French's house that night. They think he's just volunteering in the science lab still. And Buffy, because she was inspired by Dr. Gregory, is like, I'm going to do my homework, and goes into the stacks to look at bugs. And we have this scene where she comes down because she had seen Miss French turn her head like all the way around after being forced to go to therapy by Principal Flutie in a funny attempt to be like, we're responsible adults here at Sunnydale High. So Buffy's like, aha! Praying mantises' heads are the only creatures that heads spin all the way around. Only insect. They're not the only creature. And they don't go 360, they go 180. Owls can go 270 around. The closest all the way around creature is actually the tarsier, which can turn their heads almost 360 degrees. So
I mean, let's cut Buffy some slack. She'd only just started doing homework for the first time in her life half an hour before.
It's just funny that it was very much like the only ones ever.
Logic. I have solved everything with half an hour of light reading in the Seeing Eye encyclopedia section of this 90s library.
Exactly. So I just wanted to say, like, oh yeah, no, there are other creatures.
Yeah.
But so the praying mantis, because right, we're studying bugs, so entomology in science, so of course it has to be a giant bug. And so they start kind of making dots, connections together. And Giles is like, I've never thought of that. And then he goes, oh wait, my friend in school, my good old chap, Dr. Ferris Carlyle, spent years transcribing a lost pre-Germanic language. What he discovered, he kept to himself until several teenage boys were murdered in the Cotswolds.
The
He went hunting
Cotswolds.
for it. Yeah. So just quickly unpacking that. I know this summary is taking a bit longer. It's not as linear as Witch, I find. But Dr. Ferris Carlyle, fellow Oxfordian man, pre-Germanic language. So we're talking about like folklore, something that is mythological and ancient and pre-history. And then you got the Cotswolds, which is just the Alex, you're the British person, Cotswolds.
I mean, they're just like, it's just pretty. Poor people don't get to go there.
No.
Like, it's cottages and rose bushes and wooded hills, and it's just.
It's the idea
it's
that
not-
Americans have of England outside London, but it's one very specific affluent space.
Yeah, it really is. Like, and it's a space. Okay, absolutely. An academic from Oxbridge or wherever studying some ancient pre-Germanic language. Sure, let's pretend that they could live there and still function as an academic. Cool. Praying mantis, though? Praying mantis, though. Like, what does he find there?
Yeah.
Because it also drives him mad.
Yeah,
this is what else is.
Dead children, and yeah, goes mad. And so this is the important bit that Dr. Ferris Carl, he went hunting for it. And Buffy's like, it being, he's, get to the plot faster. Come on, Giles. And he goes, he calls her a she-mantis. This type of creature, Kleptis virgo,
Kleptis virgo,
virgin thief, appears in many cultures. The Greek sirens, the Celtic sea maidens, who tore the living flesh from the bones of, and then Buffy's like, please, Giles, while we're young. And so, yeah, we find out that Carlisle found this creature, went mad, and he's in some sort of institution or asylum, and he's straitjacketed and rambles and raves and lost his mind because he came across this creature.
And there's this great moment with Giles where he's on the phone and he's like, I don't care what bloody time it is. Unstrap him, wheel him to the phone and let me speak to him, or something along those lines. You have this, like, he's calling the worst kind of fake asylum, because let's also acknowledge that mental health facilities do not look like they do in horror and gothic. Like, this is very much of a genre where a man can just be strapped to the bed willy-nilly, like, because it's not like he'd been triggered and then strapped to a bed. No, this was the cold call and he was already strapped to a bed. That's how mad he's gone.
Yeah,
because of this creature.
We'll return to the she-mantis. Let's just get through the rest of Teacher's Pet really quick. So they then try to go find Xander at home to tell him, like, hey, Miss French, she's actually a giant bug woman. And Xander's not at home. So then they're like, well, let's find out more information on Miss French, because we now know that she's a bug lady. And so they hack into the school files and also the coroner's report. And Giles is just like, wasn't here, didn't see it, didn't know. It's illegal. Whatever, time, do your thing. And so they go to Miss French's house. Miss French is actually an 80-odd-year-old woman who was a substitute teacher in biology, but she retired in 1972. So Giles and Buffy and Willow are like, fuck, because they realize that this creature has taken her name, her identity fraud, and is using it to eat virgins. Xander arrives at Miss French's. She has poured a cocktail for him, a dirty martini. He doesn't know what to do. He drinks the whole thing in one sip. And
Just slams it back.
I will say that, what is the actor's name of Xander? Nicholas Brennan is a very good comedic like body actor, because his reaction after necking the martini is pretty funny. It's very kind of Mr. Bean, like, whoa. Turns out it was drugged, and we find out that Miss French is able to exist amongst humans because she has some sort of distortion, reality distorter chemicals. So we start to see her true form, and she drags Xander down to the basement, and we puts him in a cage. We find out that Blaine is down in the basement in a cage, and Blaine's like, dude, we have to get out of here, because she like wriggles and writhes and lays eggs and then makes you, doesn't say anything, but basically the men then have to copulate with the she-mantis and ejaculate onto the eggs to fertilize them, and then she bites off their head, because that's what praying mantises do. They're just like the Black Widow. They eat the male once they're done, because there you go. Well, you served your purpose. Well, farewell.
If I remember correctly, with praying mantises, the female mantis has to bite off the male mantis's head to get the necessary effect to create, new babies.
Yeah.
The biting of the head is essential to the biology.
Yeah.
So the biting of the boy's head is just spite in this one, I feel, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm not an entomologist.
Yeah, me neither. It didn't come across in my entomology brief search. But, Buffy finds out that where this Miss French actually is by catching Forkman and using him as kind of like an anti-radar sonar, where once he goes in front of a house and freaks out, she's like, this must be the place. They get there just in time. Buffy successfully dispatches this uber vamp dude with a white picket fence, commentary, suburbia, etc. Goes down into the basement, and there's this big battle between the she-mantis and Buffy, and Giles is helping. There's a comedic scene where they're using a tape recorder, and Buffy's like, bat sonar makes your whole immune system go kaplooey, and she pushes it, and then it's Giles recording to himself the merits of alphabetizing the library. And Buffy goes, Giles! Which is just such a great moment. They get it going the right way. Lots of, it sounds like the Nazgul in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Kaplooey, Buffy, machete chops apart Miss French. Boys are saved. We find out that Blaine was a virgin also, because he was preyed upon by the she-mantis. And that's teacher's pet. In not the biggest nutshell, apologies, but again, trying to kind of think about it, because there's that fork vampire bit that kind of becomes important, but it takes you out of it, I feel. So, the she-mantis, as Giles said, like the Greek sirens, like the Celtic sea maidens. So for those of you who are kind of like, oh, I know what a siren is, but I don't remember because it was 6th grade when you probably had to do Greek mythology. The sirens are known as these female human-like beings with very alluring voices. They live on rocks out in the sea. The most famous is in the Iliad. Correct? The Iliad, not the Odyssey. Yep. The Iliad.
Yeah, the Iliad. No, wait, no. No, it is the Odyssey. It's the Odyssey because it's Odysseus who has to plug his ears with wax.
Yes. Yeah. So they plug wax into their ears to get past, because they're actually quite unattractive. They have a woman's head, but then a bird's body.
Yeah, this is worth noting, is that they are not sexy, seductive ladies, all languid and pretty on rocks. These are bird-bodied, taloned creatures who will tear them apart. This is not the siren that we've come to expect through the Femme Fatale lens.
Right.
This is the siren, of the original mythology of she will fuck you up. You do not want to get seduced by that voice. It will be terrible.
Right. But the kind of idea of distortion of what you see and what is reality with Miss French. So she has that reality distortion of exotic looking, beautiful substitute teacher and giant she-mantis. And then also, rather than her voice, which you could argue is alluring, but she sends off pheromones, she sends off scents, chemical receptors to the body that then perk the interest of the virgins.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that this is the moment where Buffy starts straying into science, into horrific science, which will pop up again later. Miss French isn't supernatural. She's a creature. She's a creature, cryptozoology type creature, yes. But she is a living creature. She is doing things. What might have been attributed to magic hundreds of years ago has now been discovered to be pheromones. And that's something she's doing. The only, I can follow it. I'm happy with it right up until the perception filter, because then it's no. How does she use her hands? If in physical world,
sandwich full of crickets and butter.
Yeah, in the physical world, if all she has are these little flippery things that a mantis has, that means she can only move things in the physical world as if she had flippers. Doesn't matter that it looks like she has fingers. She has no fingers to use. It's one of those small things that drives me crazy. Like, I was watching Fright Night with vampires the other night, and they had like the vampire walking past a mirror, and in
Mhm.
the reflection of the mirror, you can see the vampire like open the door, but in the reflection, you only see the door.
Yeah.
But in the real world, you can see the vampire's shadow on the door. And I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
wouldn't his shadow be in the mirror?
Yeah, I mean, and in Buffy, vampires don't show up in mirrors, but the metaphysics of sunlight and how much sunlight and all of that is very murky.
Yeah.
We will call
So I'm sorry,
it.
I've created a tangent because the whole perception filter just annoyed me. It just annoyed me. Please continue with
I mean,
your
I think that it's a
analysis.
very compelling monster of the week. Little kind of goofiness, distortion, perception, reality, whatever aside, just because of the idea that we have this she-mantis, this creature that is preying on virgins, but those virgins are men. They're not women. Oftentimes, in so many stories, regardless to if it's about being eaten or sacrificed, or, like in which the good and the bad, it's usually female virgins that are the offering. And in this, it's men. So it really puts like Xander's masculinity into not question, but it puts it at a threat, because then
Yeah.
Buffy and Willow know that he's a virgin, but they'd never really thought about it. But for men, it's a mark that you're inexperienced and you're not good enough. Whereas for women, you want to preserve that, right?
Well, it's almost like masculine virginity feminizes the men.
Yes.
Like, masculine virginity is something they have to get rid of as quickly as possible in order to be manly, manly men.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas women need to preserve virginity first and then purity second so that they can be the ideal femininity.
Right.
And I think Xander's anxiety about masculinity is really important in this episode. This episode begins with a fantasy scene of
Oh,
Xander's
that's right. Yeah.
where Buffy's in this tight red satin dress, so the woman in red
Yeah.
again, and she's trying to defend herself from a vampire, but she just can't do it because she's just a little lady. And then Xander sweeps in dressed totally in black, kills the vampire by like chucking the stake. I don't remember if he smooches Buffy or promises to smooch her after his rockin' solo, and then he gets on stage and plays this guitar riff in
Yeah.
the bronze. And so you have this real setup of Xander's anxiety that all of culture has created Xander to expect him to be the hero, that the tiny, waifish blonde girl will be his prize for being a hero.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Buffy, the reality of Buffy, who can just take care of herself and rescue Xander. So I feel like it's very clever to set up this tension between masculinity, heroism, cultural expectations of femininity and masculinity, and then Buffy as a very feminine character who can beat the bejesus out of any kind of beastie. Like, I think it's so interesting that they did that so soon.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll have much more to say on that towards the end of the season. This idea of the female warrior that uses virginity, not so much because it's like purity, but as this kind of superpower and this source of strength in a way that is very medieval. But it's also interesting that this episode is so much about Xander's fragile masculinity, because in the previous episode, he's trying to kind of court Buffy, gives her the bracelet and witch, and Buffy, when she's under the bloodstone curse or spell and is getting kind of loopy, she's like, "Oh, Xander, you're just like one of the girls. I can talk to you. It's so easy." Even though Xander had done the exact same thing earlier in Witch to Willow, saying that she was
Yeah.
one of the guys. But Xander kind of got knocked down in Witch with his masculinity. And then this episode really hones in onto he's being threatened because he's not man enough, because he's just kind of a dork.
And also just human. Like,
Yeah.
there's a certain, like, I'm always willing to extend a certain amount of compassion to Xander because he's a teenage boy, which have the odds stacked against them anyway, in terms of, women are people and they're not really trained or brought up to expect that. So it
Mhm.
comes as such a shock, I feel. So I have some compassion for him there. And then also, he is just a human in a world of supernatural creatures. Because
Yeah.
Buffy is supernatural. She's not just a strong girl. She is a supernatural being. She is like a slayer. Yeah.
Very much established in, yeah, the supernatural, the mystical, the kind of beyond the norm. We learn that about that a bit more as we go. But
yeah, but it's kind of set up because in every generation a Slayer is born,
yeah,
so there's this kind of inherited,
through bloodlines and through
yeah,
lineage.
like a mystical heritage.
Yeah. And I mean, that being said, Xander also has some very problematic moments in both episodes. There's the
Mm,
one, I think it's in Witch, where he's kind of joking about pining after Buffy and has some sort of remark that was standing outside her bedroom window at night taking photos or something. So
yeah,
you can have,
and he goes, "That's just a joke to break the tension,"
yeah.
and it's like, haha, does that make it better?
And so a few things. So Xander is very much a product of the time in regards to male comedy and what was acceptable, and not, just thinking about, American Pie and films like that that are very much
Yeah.
of their time, and they're problematic, but you kind of have to distill them from that. And you can point out the problematic bits, but its retroactive attack is sometimes not productive. It's more, what have we learned since? But it's
Mm.
also worth noting, I guess, now, is that when Joss Whedon wrote Buffy, he wrote Xander as a kind of self analog. Xander is a lot of the times Whedon at that age, or who Whedon wanted to be at that age. Which, for me, Xander, each time I watch, kind of gets bumped back more and more. The first time I watched it, because I grew up on, American Pie and those kind of films, I didn't really get it or see it, and I wasn't paying attention because it was so much going on. But once I knew that he was kind of the Joss Whedon character, and after everything that Joss Whedon's done, just those problematic bits have an extra oomph to them.
Mm.
And Xander will have really great moments in future seasons, but he also has a lot of really fucking shitty, misogynistic, or very fragile
Oh
masculinity
God, yeah,
moments. And that's already starting, in episodes 3 and 4.
yeah.
It also
And the
happened in
thing,
1 and 2, but I don't want
yeah,
to go back to that.
I honestly, I think Xander is such a useful character because he's so realistic to how a man would react in this situation.
Especially a
In that,
teenage 16-year-old boy.
exactly 16-year-old boy at the end of the 90s, he's doing his best
Yeah.
with a bad set of tools that culture has given him.
And also,
And
not great parents that we learn. Like, his parents were
yeah,
not good role
bad.
models for
Yeah.
him.
So, yeah, I'm willing to extend Xander a certain amount of grace because he does have some really powerful moments,
Mm.
which I miss because the first time I watched it, Xander was just like, I had a lot of friend groups as a teenager that were made up of boys. And so Xander was just very familiar,
Yeah.
that dynamic. And so it was just like, oh, he's just one of the friends. And then I watched Buffy in my 20s and I was like, Xander's a monster. Oh God. And then I watched it again in my 30s and I went, actually, he's just a bloke. He's just doing his best
Yeah.
with a bad set of tools. And now I'm wondering how I'll feel again, like a few
Watching it.
years later,
Yeah.
again, watching Xander.
Well, and it was funny because, as I've said, I'm watching these episodes with my boyfriend and his best friend slash our housemate. And so their commentary throughout the episodes is quite funny. So, in which we didn't touch about it, but the driver's ed class and just the whole chaos that Cordelia gets in the car and can't see. And Tom, my boyfriend, looked at me and he went, "Doesn't the instructor not have paddles on his side of the car, like any driving course where they can stop the car and pull out the clutch and everything?" And I was like, "It's a TV show." But they were kind of talking amongst themselves throughout Teacher's Pet, going, "Oh, did you have a teacher like that in high school where you would have gone to her house at night and things?" And it was kind of, for me, like, there was a teacher in high school that a lot of the girls had a crush on, but it wasn't, "Oh, I'd go to his house" kind of thing, or like predatory. So it was funny to hear, 30-year-old men kind of retroactively looking, going, "Oh, is there a scenario where that wouldn't have been, it would have been creepy, but I would have been fine with it?"
I mean, in my school, again, with the internal view of the girl in the guy group, I was one of the guys, but also, there's all that teenage drama. There was one teacher that the boys were actually quite predatory towards. Like, they liked her so
Yeah.
much, they were actually a problem. And I hope she was less aware of that
Yeah.
than like, because, yeah. So it's just interesting that this episode is setting up what is essentially a, a sexual assault narrative. These boys are being sexually assaulted by a figure of authority who is a woman, but there's this cultural tension that they should be happy about it because it's like a Mrs. Robinson
Yeah.
situation where you're getting the experienced older woman who's initiating you, and I'm like, no, no, it's still an assault.
Yeah, I mean, even further, it definitely has, I guess, trigger warning, but like rape tones to it. So not just
Yeah,
sexual assault, but like actual
yeah,
physical, incredibly problematic, that it's kind of, yeah, as you just said, not glossed over, but it's made to be, but guys love older women, attractive older women, and like she's into the fact that they're virgins and all of that.
Well, it's like there was an episode of South Park that came out approximately around this time. I don't know, I'm not a big South Park fan, but I know of this scene. And it's where a student goes to the police and is like, my female teacher is a problem. She's assaulting me. And the cops are like, she hot? Nice. And then the student's like, no, I'm in danger. And they're like, nice. And it's terrible, but that's the kind of world, especially teenage boys find themselves in.
Mm-hmm.
It's dangerous. It's terrible.
Yeah. So I guess just kind of one final thing, and then we'll wrap up, is it's interesting that you say that this episode is very much about science, because it is. But also, I just wanted to say that praying mantises actually throughout culture and mythology are associated with the supernatural. And so this is very cursory research. So anyone that's an entomologist or a folklorist or something and knows a lot more, please feel free to let us know or let me know where I've gone wrong. So just quickly, the name praying mantis, right? So mantodea comes from the Greek word mantis that means prophet, and eidos means a former type. So it's like a prophet type, and that's because of how they look, right? And with their big arms and they're sitting and they look like they're praying. And then pun intended in Buffy, because praying like God, P-R-A-Y, and then pray, P-R-E-Y, like attacking. So the idea of the Mantodea was coined in 1838, so it's, a much more recent term, by the German entomologist Hermann Burmeister, just giving a shout out to where that came from and why. But then the name mantid or mantis also properly refers to this family and the idea of the praying mantis, which its Latin name is Mantis religiosa, or its taxonomic name. So that literally comes from the typical prayer-like posture that they have. So just kind of, that's some science background. But mantises are considered to have supernatural powers by many early civilizations, including ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, and Assyria. And a cultural trope that takes that in cartoons, and Buffy, we see, is the female mantis as a femme fatale because of its man-eating and the way that it reproduces. And funnily enough, they're also some of the bugs most commonly kept as pets. So literally teachers' pets. But they live for about a year, so you have to breed them if you want them as pets, which I just, again, kind of just funny because the whole episode is about breeding and things. But there are actually lots of beliefs in Africa regarding the praying mantis, that it brings good luck. So in South Africa, the Khoi and San believe that man and nature are intertwined, which is very medieval, and that because it has a prayer posture, this very kind of, regal looking posture, that the mantis is kind of like a god of those creatures. Or it could be a manifestation of a trickster deity. So very much, like Loki in Norse mythology. So for the San, this is the trickster deity Kagen, who can assume other forms like a snake or a vulture. So other animals that are associated with deceit and decay. But also the Greeks believed that the praying mantis had the ability to show lost travelers their way home. And in the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, the bird fly is a minor god that leads the souls of the dead to the underworld. So it may not be the mantis itself, but there's an analog, there's a kind of similarity. And then apparently in the 9th century BCE, in Nineveh, grasshoppers, which are similar to praying mantises, but not the exact same, right? Because they hop and can fly and mantises can't fly. But the mantis is called a necromancer and a soothsayer. And then also in South America, such as Nicaragua, they have oral traditions dedicated to the praying mantis, the Madre Culebra, a powerful predator and symbol of female symbolic authority.
Ooh.
So kind of hodgepodgey there, and again, very superficial, but lots of different associations of this bug, this creature, that are tethered to themes in this episode, but also female power, whether that's good or bad, and the ability to kind of like lead you home, the direction, to orient yourself as a kind of compass. So yeah, that's a little history on the praying mantis and how it relates to the she-mantis, the virgin stealer, virgin eater in Buffy.
And I think it's interesting as well. It's one last point that I would like to make that I thought kind of bridged the two episodes, is this idea of, as I was watching Witch and thinking about it, I was reminded a lot of Julia Kristeva.
Yes.
I respect the woman endlessly. Her work is fantastic. If you haven't read The Powers of Horror by Julia Kristeva, I recommend it. They're amazing. One of the philosophies she's coined is the idea of the abject. And that is something that causes disgust and horror, and we orient our own identity against something that is abjected. So we are alive and individuals. Corpses are objects of disgust. We aren't corpses. We aren't them. We are therefore, we have a sense of self. I'm really going broad strokes. This is like deep dive French philosophy.
I mean, if you want to hear more about Julia Kristeva and how she relates to the medieval, especially, I did a guest podcast episode on the podcast Theory-ish, talking about Buffy and Saint Margaret and the abject. So
fantastic. So check
Alex is
that
doing a
out.
fantastic job. But if you want to hear more and hear me ramble and wax lyrical, please check that out. I'll have the links in the show notes.
Fabulous. Yeah, it is. It will be definitely worth listening to. It is phenomenal stuff. So yes, so one of the things that Kristeva argues is that one way in which we figure out who we are is by abjecting the mother and pushing ourselves away from the mother. So we begin as one with the mother, and then we are dependent on the mother. We literally feed on our mothers to begin with, usually, or at least biologically, that's how things are set up. And then we have to figure out a way of disengaging from that. And one of the sources of horror that pops up a lot in Gothic, especially towards women, is when there's an inappropriate engulfment of the individual by the feminine or the mother. And I thought that that was something that was happening in both episodes, where Amy's mum was literally trying to reabsorb her daughter in some way to reclaim her own youth. And then you have Miss French, who should be a figure of authority and care as a teacher, assaulting, raping, engulfing these boys to create her progeny. So I just thought there's something about the abject that's worth thinking about across the two episodes that I thought was really interesting and creepy.
Yeah, that's great. And if the abject and the kind of how Alex just described it sounds a bit familiar, it's worth saying that Julia Kristeva is a psychoanalyst. She's a feminist psychoanalyst. So a la Freud in the id, ego, and superego, Oedipus complex, it's derivative of that. But Kristeva has her own interpretation. And yeah, the abject is when you realize something is not self. So when I was talking about Epstein-Barr and viruses, the virus is abject to the body in a sense because it's not self and your white blood cells are noticing that. That's a microscopic example of the abject. The corpse is perhaps one of the most famous examples from Kristeva. It's on page 4 of her introduction.
Yeah, it's very high up. But so too are things like bodily fluids, like maternal milk.
Yeah, or excrement.
And milk in general, and excrement and sweat and tears. And
things that are literally
disgust.
They seep out of the body. Menstrual fluids and menstrual blood is a huge one.
Abject.
Yeah, we'll have to do a whole unpacking of that and get in some Peggy McCracken because that's so loaded. Yeah, so that is a great kind of way to sum up, I guess you would say, is these female figures that are abject. They are other, they are predatory, they are full of power, they're femme fatales.
They're disturbing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why they're great for storytelling.
Indeed. But we love them. We love to hate them, and sometimes we just love them.
Exactly. So Alex, for Teacher's Pet, what was your quote and your scene stealer?
Well, my quote was, to be honest, it was definitely Dr. Gregory saying, "Let's make them eat that permanent
you said
record."
that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It just made me feel so warm and fuzzy, and it just made me think about all the teachers. I say all the teachers, the one or two teachers I had who just made me feel seen.
Yeah.
And it was worth going to school because I wasn't a popular kid. So just that relationship with a teacher can be so affirming and so positive. And I wanted to give a shout out to Dr. Gregory for that one.
Absolutely. And then your scene stealer. Did you have one for Teacher's Pet?
It was Sarah Michelle Gellar's hair throughout. That is my favorite Buffy hairstyle, that kind of flippy layered thing with the wispy bangs or fringe, as we say in Britain, with the little face framing layers, and how she just kind of bops about and it bounces. And she just looks fantastic. Honorary bad scene stealer. The fighting sound effects that they have the Buffy character make, because it's not Sarah Michelle Gellar.
They're definitely different than ones we get later on.
So bad.
Great.
What about you? What's your quote?
My quote is not a quote. It's when Miss French has the she-mantis in her form at the bottom is doing eeny, meeny, miny, mo between Xander and Blaine. Yeah. Because they go, is she? And it's really, absurd and funny and I loved it. And then my scene stealer, aside from just the whole she-mantis look, because it's actually a pretty good special effect compared to some things we will see.
Oh yeah, it is good.
But my scene stealer is when Buffy's in Weatherly Park hunting, and she has her hair up, and her hair, it has to be in a hair tie, but it's also wrapped in a leopard print wrist snap, which, you know, like when you're a kid and you get
Oh yeah,
a snap on your wrist, she has one in her hair that's like covering, it's not a scrunchie, it's covering her ponytail. And it's just so 90s. And it makes me yearn for wrist snaps that you'd get either in a vending machine or out of the ice cream truck, or, you know, you'd go to Claire's and get them, or just, you know, they were so satisfying, that snap.
they
And they were like
were.
soft zebra print, leopard print, cheetah print.
Or you could get the ones where it was kind of holographic.
Yeah.
So it would change depending on where you rolled your wrist. See, the thing is, I remember being a kid and trying to use those as a pony cuff type situation. And it never stayed in, obviously, because it's not made for that. How did they do it? How did they make that hold?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, she must have had a ponytail under it and then use that to wrap around.
But then you'd still need to like pin it in somehow.
Yeah. Or at least that's what
Mysterious.
it looked like, was a wrist snap thing.
I love
So
it
I'm going to
though.
say that it was. It could have been a totally different apparatus, but that was my scene stealer because it's just
Beautiful.
so of its time.
Yeah.
And then cross-watch, just briefly, Buffy doesn't wear a cross in either episode. I was going to say, Alex and I noticed one thing, which was
her earring. So she wears mismatched earrings throughout because she has an uneven number of piercings in each ear, 3 in one, 2 in the other. And in her right ear, I want to say, she has this kind of dangle earring, the strop earring, which is like a little stone with 4 points at the top, bottom, and side. So it's kind of cruciform, but not
like
really.
star diamond kind of shape.
But it's also just that kind of vaguely ethnic style of jewelry that was very popular in the 90s, where they just have a shape and then stick beads of metal around it, and then go, that'll do. That's a style, right? And so it's kind of a not cross-watch.
Yeah, so cross-watch 0 this week, no comment. But
disappointing.
There are some coming, and now that I've set cross-watch, and then we've just had the chunky cross and then none, I'm kind of like, oh man, that should have incorporated later, but I know they're coming.
They're coming. They're coming. So, of course, it's worth noting that in our next episode, will it be another double header?
Yes, it'll be another double header of Never Kill a Boy on the First Date, and the episode
is it The Pack?
Comes after that, which is indeed The Pack.
One of my least favorite episodes, so that will be fun.
Yeah, it is definitely, I would say, one of the weakest of season 1, if not the weakest. So, yes, Never Kill a Boy.
Something to look forward to, listeners.
And then we'll have a single episode following the double header on Ain't
Yep.
Then we will have a double header of I, Robot You, Jane with The Puppet Show. Another double header of Nightmares and Out of Mind, Out of Sight. And then to wrap up the season, we'll have a spectacular, probably long episode on the season 1 finale, Prophecy Girl.
Yes.
That's what we have coming.
Indeed. And the reason why we're doing this is because we know that we are focusing on the medieval primarily, but some episodes will be more medieval than others and deserve more attention. Whereas episodes like The Pack, we can talk about some medieval influences in terms of shape-shifting, for example. I'm happy to discuss that. That will be upcoming. But it's worth giving Angel, for example, his own episode. So we double head some of them so that we can really dig into the juicier episodes. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, exactly. And also it kind of, we realized as we were pairing them that, for example, Witch and Teacher's Pet fell under the Femme Fatale kind of theme. Never Kill a Boy and The Pack both also kind of comment on masculinity again, but also a bit more on like life and death and threats. I, Robot You, Jane and The Puppet Show is beasties and inanimate objects.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to that, like uncanny valley kind of layers.
And then Nightmares and Out of Mind, Out of Sight is all about like metaphysics, and that'll be like us really getting into the Hellmouth and how it can distort reality or literally quite alter it in ways that are much more profound than just attracting vampires and other demons. So you have that to look forward to. But until then, Alex, where can we find you?
You can find me, Dr. Alex Carabine, on Instagram as Decadence and Dark Ages, or you can find me through my website, Literature Unlocked, where I do occasional blogs, not that many. I am so busy, I'm sorry. But you can also find links to my events that I run as well. So I do talks and workshops and creative writing groups all around the Gothic primarily. So you can find me through there. What about you, Meaghan? Where are you on the internet?
On the internet, you can find me on Instagram under the handle at morbid.may, and May is spelled Mae. And then in regards to a website, I do not necessarily have one, so I will just plug our website, damsmacabre.com. There you can find little bios about us, links to our Instagrams. Again, we have a bookshop affiliate account that I moderate with material that is related to my research, but also this series. And I think that's it for the time being, where
Yeah.
you can find me, or LinkedIn, other more professional things, not so much for this.
Boo. Boo, LinkedIn.
But I think that's it. So until next time, I'm Meaghan.
I'm Alex.
And this is Dams Macabre.